Welcome to the 700 Club. A major victory for Israel at the United Nations yesterday. The General Assembly adopted a resolution to combat Holocaust denial and surging anti-Semitism.
The UN took the action on the anniversary of one of the darkest days in history. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
The timely action becomes the first Israeli-sponsored resolution passed by the UN General Assembly in 17 years, and only the second in Israel's history. The resolution, backed by dozens of countries, calls for action to combat Holocaust denial and distortion as anti-Semitism continues to surge globally. A key element calls on social media giants such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter to remove any offensive content of this nature from their platforms. Israel's UN ambassador cited a report showing the failure of social media companies in dealing with complaints over anti-Semitic content, including Facebook, which dealt with only 11% of the posts. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, tells CBN News why this resolution is so significant.
Unfortunately, today with social media, we are seeing a wave of anti-Semitism, a wave of Holocaust denial, and I think the fact that the UN General Assembly will adopt a majority resolution saying that all countries should fight Holocaust denial, should educate about the Holocaust, it is very important.
Thursday's vote also came on the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference. That's when the leadership of Nazi Germany decided to implement the final solution, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews.
It's very important, very symbolic that we're passing the resolution actually today, but we have to learn the lesson about the future. When you have radical leaders actually speaking about how they can terminate the Jewish people, we have to take it seriously. So back then it was Nazi Germany, today the Iranian regime. When you hear the rhetoric, to the threats coming from Tehran, we should not ignore them. We should face them. We should take all the necessary measures to protect ourselves.
The first Israeli resolution supported by UN members came in 2005, designated January 27th as Holocaust Remembrance Day. Danon emphasized today's generation needs to learn about the Holocaust, especially from those who endured it. This week, CBN News sat down with 98-year-old Holocaust survivor Walter Bingham.
Later this month is going to be International Holocaust Remembrance Day. What's the lesson that people need to take away?
Never again. Just 2 words, never again. The lesson is never again. Unfortunately, people don't learn.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And unfortunately, people do not learn and absolutely refuse to learn. You look at that parade, that's happening in Denmark. So modern, supposedly enlightened culture, progressive culture, European culture, and they're having an anti-Semitic parade. And you just stand back. You got to be kidding. But here's something else that is absolutely incredible. On this resolution, you had roughly 114 countries co-sign it and say, well, co-sponsor it and say, we want to support this. So it comes before the UN, and the UN adopts it by consensus. But one country says, no, we want to disassociate ourselves from this resolution. So there's no vote, there's no opportunity to vote no, but they say, well, we're going to disassociate. Guess what that country is? It's Iran, the same country we're trying to negotiate with. Realize if they get a nuclear weapon for Israel, that's a no-go zone, because they will absolutely try to use it. They are fully behind wiping Israel off the planet. They've made resolutions. They've tried to pass resolutions at the UN for this. They did the same thing with a similar resolution back in 2007. They don't want Israel to exist. So I've got to ask the question, why in the world are we trying to negotiate with them? In other news, President Biden and the Democrats are plunging in the polls. So Republicans are gearing up for gains in this year's midterm elections. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The head of the Republican National Committee tells CBN News she thinks Democrats don't appear to care about the problems Americans face today. CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, spoke with Ronna McDaniel, who says while the GOP is poised to take the House and Senate back, there's still a lot of work ahead of them.
If polls are accurate, the Democrat Party will be in for a rude awakening in November's midterm elections. At this point, the crises seem too many to name, although in my interview with RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, she came with a list.
I mean, David, what hasn't gone wrong for the Democrats? And it's not a joyful thing because the American people are the ones suffering as a result of their failed leadership. Let's look at inflation, our empty grocery store shelves, what our kids suffered through with this pandemic and being out of school, and still schools that are out right now and virtual. And I think the biggest issue is they don't seem to care. They don't seem to understand that Americans are really hurting under their policies and their leadership.
With a Democrat platform embracing abortion at any stage, McDaniel believes Republicans can make inroads on the life issue.
We are very proud to fight for the unborn and actually follow the science.
So what's the best route to victory in the midterms? Although Donald Trump may be toxic to some, McDaniel doesn't shy away from the former president.
Well, there's no question he's incredibly popular in our party. I think his popularity's grown as we've contrasted what he did with his administration policy-wise versus what we're seeing under Biden. And he's going to be a key in the midterms. We're going to need him out.
One outreach, however, is drawing criticism. The new RNC Pride Coalition.
Is the RNC okay with the LGBT sexuality agenda? Because, look, conservative Christians say it's damaging the moral underpinnings of our Judeo-Christian culture. They don't think you should do this. I know you've been getting a lot of pushback. I've got to ask you about it. Do you regret that at all?
So it's actually a gay outreach, and it's similar to what the Trump campaign had. And listen, this is what I always say. Because you invite someone to your church doesn't mean you change your doctrine.
McDaniel wants a big tent and will let Republican voters decide who should be representing their party, even if they are more moderate.
Are you looking to purge these rhinos within the Republican Party?
I don't know if I like the word purge. I think that's a tough word. I think we let the process play out. We look to represent the voters.
The party also wants to be represented fairly in upcoming presidential debates. They've asked potential contenders to sign a pledge to not participate with the Commission on Presidential Debates due to past controversies. But then what happens?
What does that venue potentially look like? Like conservative think tanks, conservative groups? What could
well, we
possibly
can negotiate directly with networks. We can negotiate with universities and go to the DNC.
But for now, 2022 remains the main focus.
Let's look at what Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are doing to this country. They want to strip away religious freedom. They voted for taxpayer-funded abortions. They are all right with abortions being done on a due date. It is radical, their agenda. They want to strip away the filibuster. They want to stack the Supreme Court, which would upend everything we stand for in this country. So every single day, I'm going to talk about Democrats.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, David. Well, today is the annual March for Life right here in Washington, taking place on the anniversary of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling legalizing abortion. 49 years later, that decision, a cultural shift is taking place in America. Abortion clinics are closing as more pro-life pregnancy centers open up, outnumbering them by a rate of 4 to 1. And now, with a more conservative Supreme Court, they see a real chance to strike down Roe v. Wade. Charlene Aaron has the story.
For 25 years, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, or NIFLA, has equipped pregnancy centers to serve women and their communities. Now, after all the time, work, and money, its leaders and supporters are talking about the potential end of legalized abortion in America. The numbers and accomplishments tell the story of how this organization helps women choose life. Some 1,600 U.S. pregnancy centers. The introduction of using ultrasounds to the pro-life movement.
Since we started that, over 1,300 pro-life medical clinics utilizing ultrasound are in existence across the country. And an abortion-minded woman comes in, she's been told it's a blob of tissue, she sees the ultrasound, and bingo, we've seen huge numbers of women choose life because of that.
Alveda King applauds the boots-on-the-ground work.
The pregnancy care centers are the heart of the pro-life movement. And the reason I believe that, they don't just say to a mother who comes to the door and she's pregnant and faced with a decision to birth a child or not, but they speak to the mother, They support the birth of the child. The father is welcome and the community is welcome. So I'm very fond of NIFLA's work.
Many pro-life advocates are optimistic that the culture is changing in favor of life. That includes Abby Johnson, a former manager in the abortion industry.
Right now, though, I'm so hopeful. I mean, we've got, I think, almost 4 times the number of pregnancy centers as we have abortion clinics in the United States. Abortion clinics are, closing down year after year. Culture is changing. Young people's minds are changing.
My prayer in the pro-life movement is that people will wake up, that the eyes of the nation and the world will open and realize that life is sacred from the womb to the tomb, and that there are life-affirming solutions that do not require that we kill the youngest, the weakest, and most innocent, the babies in the womb. I pray that we wake up, open our eyes, and choose life.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
And our live streaming coverage of the 49th Annual March for Life is today at noon Eastern on our CBN News YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com and search for CBN News. After the event is over, you'll be able to see highlights and interviews on our YouTube channel as well as cbnnews.com. Gordon, back to you.
What a wonderful prayer. And I just applaud Avita King. What a tremendous prayer. Let's pray that over our nation. Let's pray that the eyes of our understanding would be enlightened, that we would see that child for who they really are.